The lights are so bright they erase all shadows. They pour down from every direction, reflecting off polished marble and white stone, off golden glass and bronze. They strike the jewels on her body until it feels impossible that a human being could stand at the center of such glare. Gold rings her wrists. Gold circles her neck. A chain so heavy it does not rest on her shoulders alone. Two Roman gods walk close, not to threaten her, but to carry the weight that would otherwise crush her collarbone. She does not weep. She does not plead. She does not look at the crowd. Around her, tens of thousands of voices rise and fall in a language she understands perfectly and refuses to answer in. She has already been walking for 3 hours. She will walk for more. The procession stretches endlessly in front of her. Iron cages roll past filled with lions shipped from Africa. Captured soldiers stumble forward, blood still seeping through bandages that have not yet dried. Wooden frames painted with images of cities burning sway as they are pulled along, entire wars reduced to portable theater. Everything moves slowly. Rome wants the moment to last. Behind her is silence. A deliberate gap in the parade. The space reserved for those who will not see the sunset again. Look at her carefully. The silk still gleams. The gemstones catch the Mediterranean light. The robes still declare royalty. The chains are real gold. And that is the first thing that should make you uneasy. Why is a woman walking to her supposed execution dressed like a queen? Why are they not killing her? This is the image history repeats. The captured queen. The Roman triumph. The humiliation before death. Or what most people think happened here is wrong. Or worse. It did happen, but not for the reasons anyone likes to admit. If you want to understand what Rome truly did to queens, you must first understand what queens were never allowed to be. If documented history still matters, stay with me. Because what follows is not what you were taught. Her feet are bleeding now. She does not look down. It is the year 272 of the Common Era. Her name is Zenobia. She was queen of Palmyra. While Rome tore itself apart in civil war, she did something no woman and very few men had ever managed to do. She built an empire. From Egypt to Anatolia, cities bent to her authority. Caravans paid her taxes. Armies marched under her banners. Roman legions could not stop her, not because she was weak, but because Rome was busy killing itself. Emperors rose and fell in months. Generals declared themselves rulers and were murdered by their own troops. The empire bled from the inside. Zenobia filled the vacuum. But civil wars always end. And when Emperor Aurelian finally turned east, the balance collapsed. Her allies abandoned her. Her generals defected. Her army broke. She fled toward Persia with what remained. They caught her at the Euphrates. She did not fight. There was nowhere left to run. By Roman tradition, captured enemies were marched through the streets in triumph. Public victory rituals. Defeated kings dragged in chains. Crowds cheering. Then execution. The Tullianum waited. The stone prison beneath the Capitoline Hill where Rome strangled its most dangerous enemies and buried them in darkness. This had been Roman custom for 500 years. Zenobia should have died there. That is the story people tell. Except it is not what happened. Because something went wrong. Or rather, something went deliberately different. Aurelian captured Zenobia in 272. But she did not appear in his triumph until 274. 2 full years passed. That delay is everything. Standard practice was immediate display. Vercingetorix walked in Caesar's triumph within months of surrender. Jugurtha was paraded the same year he was captured. Rome did not wait. So why wait now? Most histories stop asking questions right here. They say she walked. They say she was humiliated. They move on. That is why history keeps lying. And why what comes next matters. The delay was not mercy. Rome did not hesitate because it was unsure what to do with Zenobia. Rome hesitated because it knew exactly what to do, and that required time. Roman law was clear on this point. Once defeated in war, a foreign ruler ceased to exist as a legal person. Status ended at capture. Under the ius gentium, the law of nations, defeat converted freedom into property. A queen became a thing owned by the Roman state. Not a prisoner. Not a guest. Property. And property could be used. But Rome had learned something over centuries of conquest. Killing a ruler was simple. Breaking what the ruler represented took longer. Zenobia was not dangerous because she had lost. She was dangerous because people remembered that she had once ruled. Memory creates resistance. So Rome did not erase her quickly. Rome prepared her. For 2 years, Zenobia did not sit in a dungeon awaiting execution. She was placed into something far more precise. Preparation custody. Roman sources barely name it, but the pattern appears again and again when captured royalty is involved. She was held in controlled isolation. Not beaten. Not tortured. Managed. Her food was measured, not withheld. Enough to survive. Not enough to remain strong. Roman military physicians understood bodies. They understood muscle loss. They understood fatigue. They calculated exactly how little nourishment kept a person alive while slowly draining endurance. Meals arrived at irregular times. Sometimes twice in one day. Sometimes not at all. The body never adapted. The mind never rested. Sleep followed the same logic. Guards rotated watches deliberately out of rhythm. Doors slammed without warning. Torches were replaced at night, flooding the cell with light when darkness might have allowed rest. Never silence. Never darkness. Never predictability. Not enough to leave marks. Enough to hollow her out. Days passed where no one spoke to her at all. Food slid through a slot. Water left on the floor. Then suddenly, conversation. Interrogations that asked nothing new. Questions already answered. Questions that went nowhere. Where is the treasury? Who remains loyal? Where is your son? She answered because answering reminded her she was still human. Then silence again. This alternation was not accidental. Isolation breaks the sense of self. Forced interaction reminds the victim, but the self is still accessible to control. By the time the triumph came, Zenobia could still stand. But not for long. That was the point. Ancient accounts note that gods supported her during the procession. Not because she was injured. Not because she was tortured. Because she was weakened. Weak enough that Rome could hold her upright. That image was essential. But there was another element to the preparation that Roman writers mention only briefly. Captive royalty were made to watch. They were brought to the arena. Not as fighters. As observers. Hesiod's diary records that high-minus status captives were seated in guarded sections during executions and games. They watched criminals torn apart by animals. They watched gladiators bleed to death. They watched prisoners of earlier wars die in staged reenactments of Rome's victories. They watched crowds cheer. They watched what happened to captives who were not preserved. This was education. Rome wanted them to understand the difference between execution and mercy. By the time Zenobia walked through Rome in gold chains, she had already seen death up close. She knew what she had been spared. And Rome knew that she knew. Before the triumph, everything changed. Her clothing was returned. Her jewels were restored. Not replaced. Cleaned. Sources mention professional jewelers polishing her ornaments. Tailors repairing silk torn during capture. Her hair was arranged in Palmyra royal style. Every detail was precise. This was not kindness. This was contrast. The crowd would see power made visible, and then see it fail. Think about what Rome engineered. A woman dressed like a ruler. Jewels worth more than most citizens would earn in a lifetime. Silks proclaiming authority, wealth, command, but unable to walk without Roman hands holding her steady. A queen who once commanded armies now supported by soldiers she once fought. That contradiction was the message, not just to her. To everyone watching, to allied kings in the crowd, to foreign envoys, to future rebels. If power could not save her, it would save no one. This is why Rome waited 2 years. This is why execution did not come immediately. Execution creates martyrs. Martyrs inspire stories. Stories create resistance. Rome did not want her dead. Rome wanted her irrelevant. That irrelevance takes time. Rome had learned this lesson the hard way. Dead rulers become symbols. Living rulers become questions. And questions are far more corrosive to rebellion than martyrs ever are. When Rome strangled defeated kings, the story ended cleanly. The enemy died. The wall closed. But when Rome let a queen live, something else happened. People watched. They watched power dissolve slowly. They watched lineage blur. They watched memory lose its edge. That was the real weapon. Zenobia was not spared because Rome respected her. She was spared because Rome needed her alive to finish the work conquest had started. By the 3rd century, Rome's empire was too large to rule through force alone. There were not enough legions. Not enough soldiers. Rome ruled through psychology, through client kings, through local rulers who governed in Rome's name. This system depended on belief. Belief that obedience preserved status. Belief that resistance erased it. Captured queens were proof. If Rome killed Zenobia immediately, she would become legend. A woman who defied the empire and died for it. Legends travel faster than armies. Rome had already learned this with Spartacus. They crucified 6,000 men along the Appian Way, and still slave revolts followed. Violence alone was not enough, so Rome refined the method. Let her live. Let her age. Let her fade. Let her daughters marry Romans. Let her grandchildren speak Latin. Let her people see that resistance does not end in glory. It ends in absorption. This was not mercy. It was erasure that walked and breathed. Zenobia understood this before the triumph ever began. She had watched enough executions to know the pattern. She had seen which captives were killed quickly. She had noticed that she was not among them. That knowledge sat heavier than the chains. Because death would have been simple. Survival meant watching everything she had built lose meaning. When she walked through Rome, she walked past embassies from eastern kingdoms. Men who ruled cities she had once commanded. They watched her carefully. They were not looking at the chains. They were looking at her face. Rome needed them to see composure, dignity under defeat. Not because Rome admired it. Because dignity without power is harmless. A queen who rages inspires rebellion. A queen who survives quietly teaches submission. This is why ancient sources keep repeating the same detail. She maintained remarkable composure. They were not praising her. They were noting success. The system worked. After the triumph, Zenobia was not taken to the Tullianum. She was given a villa, outside Rome, close enough to be visible, far enough to be irrelevant. She lived comfortably. That comfort was part of the punishment. She ate Roman food. She spoke Latin. She was surrounded by Romans. Her daughters married Roman nobles. Her bloodline continued, but it continued as Roman. Palmyra remembered her as a defeated queen. Rome remembered her as a curiosity. Lyda remembered her as a ruler. And that was the goal. Execution ends a threat. Assimilation prevents another one. Rome did not just conquer territories. It redefined what power was allowed to look like. After Zenobia, Eastern queens disappear from history for generations. Not because women stopped being capable, because memory had been trained. Resistance became pointless. Survival became cautionary. Now look back at another queen. Boudica. Rome did not do the same thing to her. They flogged her publicly. They violated her daughters in front of their people. They wanted rebellion. Why? Because Britain was unstable. Slow submission would take too long. Rome provoked total revolt, then crushed it completely. 80,000 Britons died in a single day. After that, Britain stayed quiet. Different provinces required different lessons. Zenobia needed to live. Boudica needed to fall fast and publicly. Both outcomes served the same purpose: control. Rome did not improvise cruelty. It engineered outcomes. And it understood something that still makes us uncomfortable. The cruelest fate for a queen is not death. It is survival without significance. Living long enough to watch everything you build become irrelevant. Zenobia's villa still exists. They ruin now. No plaque. No tour. The prison where male kings were wrangled is preserved. Visitors line up to see where Vercingetorix died. Where Jugurtha starved. Execution is dramatic. Survival is quiet. Quiet is easy to forget. That is why history forgets queens. And that forgetting was part of the punishment. Rome didn't just punish queens. It rewrote what queenship was allowed to be. After Zenobia, something changes in the historical record that scholars often mention but rarely explain plainly. Female rulers don't disappear everywhere. They disappear specifically where Rome has demonstrated what happens to them. In the eastern provinces, queens had ruled for centuries. Not as consorts, as sovereigns. Palmyra had accepted female authority long before Zenobia. So had Egypt. So had parts of Anatolia and Arabia. After 274 CE, that tradition collapses. No new Eastern queen challenges Rome for nearly 200 years. Not because women suddenly lost political skill. Because memory had been engineered. Rome taught a lesson so thoroughly that it didn't need to be repeated. This is how power actually works. Not by destroying every challenger, but by shaping what future challenges believe is possible. Zenobia became a boundary. a visible example of the maximum power a woman could reach, and the inevitable outcome of crossing that line. From that point forward, female authority was allowed only in certain forms. Never military, never independent, never sovereign. Queens became wives, mothers, mediators. Useful, respectable, contained. This pattern repeats. After Boudica, Britain stops burying women with weapons. Archaeology shows it clearly. For generations before 60 CE, women appear in warrior burials. After the revolt, they vanished. The culture learned, not through law, through terror and memory. Rome didn't need to outlaw female leadership. It made it psychologically unthinkable. And this is where modern discomfort begins. Because Rome is not ancient history in the way we like to pretend. Rome is a template. When modern societies say they have moved beyond empire, beyond conquest, beyond domination, they are usually lying to themselves. They have just changed the tools. We no longer parade defeated queens through marble streets. We parade them through headlines. We no longer starve them in cells. We starve them of legitimacy. We don't ask whether a fallen male leader maintained composure. We ask whether a woman cried, whether she stayed dignified, whether she begged, whether she handled it well. Those questions are not accidental. They come from Rome. The triumph trained audiences to watch women not for power but for performance. Zenobia's dignity mattered because Rome needed it too. A queen who screamed would expose the cruelty. A queen who walked silently made it look justified. And we still reward silence over resistance. We still confuse endurance with virtue. We still call survival mercy when it is simply a longer punishment. This is why the sources emphasize her composure. Not because it was admirable. Because it completed the ritual. The triumph only works if the captive plays her role. Zenobia did. Whether by choice or exhaustion, she did. And that choice is the most uncomfortable part of all. Because Rome didn't just break queens physically. It forced them into collaboration with their own erosor. Walk with dignity. Wear the jewels. Do not scream. Participate in the story that removes you from history. That is a far more sophisticated form of domination than execution. Execution ends resistance. Performance rewrites meaning. Zenobia lived long enough to see that rewrites succeed. Palmyra never rebelled again. Eastern queens vanished. Rome's client-minus-king system expanded. And Rome convinced itself that it had been merciful. That lie survived the empire. It survived into textbooks, into museums, into popular history. We remember Zenobia as a defeated queen who was spared. We almost never ask why sparing her mattered more than killing her. Now ask yourself something uncomfortable. If Rome truly believed female power was illegitimate, why was Zenobia so dangerous? If women could not rule, why did Rome need to spend 2 years preparing her destruction? Why the starvation? Why the theater? Why the jewels? You don't perform this much ritual for someone who doesn't matter. Zenobia mattered. And that is why Rome could not simply kill her. In the final part, we'll talk about what Rome accidentally revealed by doing all of this. Because in trying to break queens, Rome exposed a truth it never intended to admit. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Rome revealed something it never meant to. By sparing queens instead of killing them, Rome admitted that execution was not always enough. Execution ends a life, but it can strengthen a symbol. Rome had learned this the hard way. Spartacus died and his name spread. The Jewish rebels died, and their faith hardened. Martyrs do not weaken resistance. They fertilize it. Queens were especially dangerous martyrs. A dead queen becomes eternal. A living queen becomes complicated. Rome chose complication. What Rome understood, perhaps better than any empire before it, was that power is not just held by armies. It is held by imagination. People obey not because they are beaten every day, but because they believe resistance is futile, shameful, or meaningless. Zenobia, alive, aging, dependent, absorbed, accomplished more than Zenobia executed ever could. Her survival told future rebels something subtle but devastating. You may fight. You may even win for a time. But in the end, Rome will not destroy you. It will outlive you. And it will make your victory irrelevant. That is a different kind of fear. Fear of death burns hot and fast. Fear of erasure lasts generations. Look at what happens next. After Zenobia, Rome does not face another large scale Eastern revolt led by a sovereign woman. Not because women stopped being ambitious, not because cultures suddenly changed, but because Rome had demonstrated the full cost of crossing that line. And the cost was not death. It was watching your world continue without you. This is why Zenobia's villa matters. Not as a place but as a concept. A former queen living quietly under Roman oversight. No throne. No army. No authority. Just survival. That image spread far beyond Rome. Merchants talked. Envoys whispered. Client kings noticed. Rome did not need to say, "This will happen to you." It had already shown them. Now look at how Rome treated women who cooperated. Clytemnestra, queen of the Brigantes, ruled with Roman support for decades. She handed over Caritaceus, a rebel leader, to Roman authorities. Rome praised her. But notice what kind of queen she was allowed to be. She ruled through alliances, marriages, negotiation. Never through force. When her rule collapsed due to internal conflict, Rome intervened, not to restore her power, but to stabilize the region. Her usefulness mattered more than her authority. That became the model. A queen could exist, but only as an extension of Rome. Independent female power was not tolerated. Dependent female authority was acceptable. This distinction shaped Europe long after Rome fell. Medieval queens ruled through husbands, sons, regents. Rare exceptions existed, but they were treated as anomalies, not precedents. The memory of Rome lingered, and memory governs behavior more effectively than law. This brings us back to the triumph. Why the silence? Why the jewels? Why the insistence on dignity? The triumph was not designed to humiliate Zenobia alone. It was designed to instruct the audience. Everyone watching learned something. The Roman citizen learned that Rome was supreme even over foreign royalty. The provincial ally learned what resistance would cost. The potential rebel learned that survival could be worse than death. And Zenobia learned that her life now belonged to Rome's story. Even her mercy was not hers. This is why historians struggle with Zenobia. They want her to be either a tragic hero or a defeated enemy. She is neither. She is evidence. Evidence of how advanced Roman control had become by the 3rd century. Not just physical domination. Narrative domination. Rome controlled how stories ended. And endings shape memory. Now consider something unsettling. Rome fell, but the method survived. Empires after Rome copied the technique. Colonial powers did the same. They spared leaders, absorbed them, educated their children, married them into the ruling class. Not kindness. Neutralization. A dead rebel inspires revenge. A living, accommodated rebel inspires doubt. Was resistance worth it? Did it change anything? Woodland cooperation have been easier. These questions weaken resistance before it begins. Zenobia's life after capture was Rome's most successful victory. Not Actium, not Dacia, not Britain. Her survival was the message. And it worked. Palmyra ever rose again. The East remained quiet. Rome stabilized. For a time. But here is the irony: Rome never escaped. By breaking queens this way, Rome also revealed its own weakness. It could not tolerate rivals who inspired loyalty. It could not coexist with alternative sources of authority. It needed to rewrite identities to survive. That kind of system is powerful but fragile. It depends on constant reinforcement. When the reinforcement fails, collapse comes quickly. Rome eventually fell not because it lacked armies, but because it lost credibility. Client kings stopped believing. Provincial elites stopped cooperating. Legions stopped trusting emperors. The same machinery that erased others turned inward. And that is the final lesson Zenobia leaves behind. An empire that survives by erasing meaning will eventually erase itself. Zenobia did not defeat Rome, but Rome revealed itself through her. And once revealed, that truth cannot be hidden again. In the final section we will step back and ask the question history warns. What does remembering Zenobia actually require from us? Because remembering is not passive. It changes what we tolerate. It changes what we excuse. And it changes what we call mercy. Remembering Zenobia is not about admiration. It is about responsibility. History often asks us to admire strength. Rarely does it ask us to examine what strength does when it feels threatened. Rome did not fear Zenobia because she was a woman. Rome feared her because people followed her. They believed in her authority. They accepted her rule. They fought for her. That is what empires cannot tolerate. Not rebellion alone, but belief. Killing her would have confirmed that belief. Letting her live dissolved it. And that is the uncomfortable truth history prefers not to sit with. Zenobia's survival was not mercy. It was strategy. It was the long punishment. A punishment designed to teach future generations that resistance leads not to glory, but to irrelevance. That is why her story matters now, because the same logic still operates. We still live in systems that claim despair while they erase, that allow survival while stripping meaning, that call endurance a virtue when it is really coercion. We still ask the same questions Rome trained audiences to ask. Did she stay dignified? Did she maintain composure? Did she accept her fate gracefully? Those questions are not neutral. They are inherited. They come from triumphs, from chains disguised as gold, from silence mistaken for strength. Zenobia did not lose because she lacked power. She lost because Rome understood narrative better than swords. And narratives outlast armies. Her villa stands in ruins because Rome succeeded, not in destroying her body, but in dissolving her significance. Or almost succeeded, because the moment you understand what Rome did, the spell breaks. Zenobia stops being a defeated queen. She becomes a warning about how power preserves itself, about how survival can be weaponized, about how mercy can be more violent than execution. History did not forget Zenobia by accident. It forgot her because remembering her fully is dangerous. It forces us to see that domination does not always look like brutality. Sometimes it looks like protection. Sometimes it looks like accommodation. Sometimes it looks like letting you live. And that recognition changes how you see the world. It changes how you see fallen leaders. It changes how you see second chances. It changes how you see systems that claim to spare while they quietly absorb. Zenobia died without ceremony. No monument. No mourning. That was the final act. But the fact that you're here hearing this means it did not fully work. Because memory is the one thing empires can never completely control. If this story unsettled you, it should have. If it reframed how you think about power, that is the point. History is not meant to comfort. It is meant to clarify. And once clarified, it does not let you go back. If you believe the stories of the defeated deserve to be told as carefully as those of the victors, if you think mercy should be questioned when it comes wrapped in chains, if you want to understand how empires really function beneath the myths they leave behind, then stay here. Subscribe to Crimson Historians. Because what history hides on purpose is usually the part that matters most. Zenobia was not spared. She was repurposed. And now finally, she is remembered.